1, 2, 3. Good morning. I'm Dave Kuntz from the USS Midway, and welcome to the USS Midway Museum. Today is an immensely important day. Exactly 75 years ago, on August 14th, 1945, the Japanese surrendered unconditionally to the Allied forces, officially ending World War II. More than 400,000 brave Americans paid the ultimate sacrifice during the war, and tens of millions of others lost their lives during the same time. Today we commemorate the anniversary and say thank you to America's greatest generation who fought to preserve freedom that we continue to enjoy today. We are delighted to be partnering with Honor Flight San Diego and Spirit of 45 for this ceremony, and we are beyond thankful for the 3 American heroes who are joining us today, veterans who served their nation with distinction during World War II, Don Hubbard, Hal Hansen, and Jack Scott. To help us start this ceremony, we're delighted to have the Navy Medical Center San Diego Color Guard with us today to present the colors for our national anthem. Now, if I could please have everyone rise and remain standing for the national anthem. Color Guard, advance the colors. Retire the colors.
Carry! On! Ready! Cut! Right! Right! Forward! March!
It is now my pleasure to introduce Mac McLaughlin. Mac is the president and CEO of the USS Midway Museum. He's a retired Navy Rear Admiral and a former helicopter pilot. Mac?
Well, good morning and welcome to the flight deck of the USS Midway here in beautiful San Diego. And thank you all for taking the time out of your day to be here to recognize the loyalty, the service, the sacrifice of these 3 gentlemen who are sitting over here. I think they're known as the greatest generation. I think in reality, what they did in the 1940s represents the core cultural values of what began with the colonists and has continued into present day. And that simply is, when the freedoms of our American citizens are threatened, we do not run, we defend those freedoms so that everybody can enjoy this great country of ours. You look back 75 years ago in San Diego especially, this was a big, bustling Navy and Marine Corps town. I mean, it had become a focal point for resupplying the troops overseas. We just finished training all of our people to get ready for the big amphibious landing in Japan that was planned. Our Balboa Hospital was filled with 10,000 beds of recovering young kids from World War II. And oh, by the way, they were expanding those beds to get ready for 10,000 plus more that were still to come. Here in San Diego, 75 years ago today, these three guys over here were like 18 years old, 20 years old. They still look like they're 18 or 20, but that's because I'm right behind them.
I'm right with you.
And age becomes a relative issue the older you get. But here in San Diego, it's especially a celebratory day that we get to honor by the nurse and the kissing sailor down there as a tribute to one of the happiest days in American history, the end of World War II. And we're here to celebrate with these three great veterans today, who they are, what they stand for as Americans, with so much discord and confusing messages and issues. The traditional values of our great citizens that defend our freedoms remains to this day. Here in San Diego that day, there were two big supply ships on each side of this Navy pier. They were loading up young American boys to send them off to sea to get ready to invade. Out in North Island, the airplanes were flying around training. Do we have an unscheduled flyover? And they were called back for an emergency landing. And they were told that the war was over and they didn't have to train for war anymore. Here, right along Broadway and North Harbor Drive, the radios were on in some of the cars, and the cars stopped right in the middle of Broadway, and people jumped on the hoods and the roofs of the car, started dancing and celebrating, because those parents no longer had to drive their sons down here to go off to war and possibly not return. The war was over, August 14th, 1945. A great day. Thank you all for being here to celebrate it with us. And thank you, our three great veterans, for being here to celebrate the day that you made possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mac. I'd now like to bring to the podium Roy Zaney. Roy is a former Marine and is currently the Assistant Director of the California chapters of Bugles Across America, and he is representing the Spirit of 45 organization today. Roy?
Thank you, Mac. I have to tell you all that I'm really out of the water on this one. Being a bugler, I'm usually about 100 feet that way. I'm never in front of a camera talking, so I got some notes here. Again, thank you, Dave, and Matt. Like Dave said, I'm the Assistant Director for Bugles Across America, and I'm here today to represent Spirit of 45 National Events Committee. As we stand here in a flight deck of the USS Midway, we can look down, see that statue, the KISS statue. Reminds us of the jubilant celebrations that took place 75 years ago today. 16 million Americans went off to fight on the battlefields, and and 6 million supported our veterans here in this country. On August 14th, 1945, World War II was finally over. It was an extraordinary day. In light of that, Spirit of 40 partners, like the Midway, San Diego Honor Flight, are remembering our World War II generation with private tributes today here on board the Midway. Buglers across America will be signing tops at 114 national cemeteries and other places across the USA today. Danny Masterson, our director of Buglers in New York City, kicked off this cross-country tribute 3 hours ago in New York City. She stood next to the Jumbotron walk-ins that will be playing a World War II tribute all day. Following her lead, buglers in locations from the East Coast moving west have been playing taps. Here at the Midway, I had the privilege of sounding taps as one of our first buglers on the West Coast. When my playing of taps has ended, here it will continue on and also be sounded in Hawaii. We are proud and honored to have the opportunity to remember and be inspired by our greatest generation. Let's pause and take a minute just to remember these men and women. The taps is played in a few minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, at the top, I'll be playing taps. We ask everyone to put their hands on their heart. If you're former or present military personnel, please render the proper hand salute. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Roy, for being here today and for also playing taps for our wreath ceremony at the conclusion of the ceremony. I'm not sure how many people know this, but 55 years ago, Roy was a member of the very prestigious Marine Drum and Bugle Corps. So thank you again, Roy, for being here. Now it's a great honor to introduce Julie Brightwell. Julie is the chairman of Honor Flight San Diego. For nearly 15 years, Julie has helped thousands of veterans, both here in California as well as when she lived back in Ohio, travel to Washington, D.C. to visit the memorials that serve them so proudly for their service and duty. So now if I could ask Julie if she could come up for a few words. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you. On behalf of Honor Flight San Diego, we thank all of you. You know, David just explained our mission again, which is to get our World War II and now our Korean War veterans back to Washington, D.C. to see the memorials that were built to honor their service and sacrifice. And that's why we're here today, thanking those World War II veterans for what they did for us 75 years ago. So since its founding in 2010, Honor Flight San Diego has had the privilege of escorting over 1,400 San Diego veterans back to Washington, D.C. at no cost to the veteran. So as a vital link to the greatest generation, we're honored to participate in this ceremony today with the Midway and the Spirit of 45. And Roy, our bugler, getting choked up and emotional reminds us of how we all feel when we deal with these veterans. I mean, it's very emotional and we're very thankful. So we just thought it was really important to recognize this 75th anniversary as such an important time in history. In years past, we've been able to celebrate the Spirit of 45 in a very different way with hundreds of veterans at the Veterans Museum, which was a celebration for them and a reunion for those that had been on Honor Flight San Diego. Obviously, this year is a little bit different, that we can't do that in person, but we're still want them to be recognized and thanked. We know that all of these veterans remember exactly where they were when President Truman announced that the war had ended. Their friends, their families, their loved ones all sent up a prayer of thanks that the guns had been silenced. And for those families and friends that had lost loved ones, it was maybe a small feeling that their lives had not been given in vain. So unfortunately, we know the members of our greatest generation are passing away, and they're all in their 90s, those veterans of World War II. We don't want their stories to pass away, and events like this help them share their stories. It helps future generations hear their stories and remember them. So Honor Flight encourages all veterans to share their story. And this week, when you see a World War II veteran or any veteran, besides thanking them for their service, we ask you to also ask them, where were they when the war ended? Because this is a special time for them to remember. As Honor Flight San Diego, we need to ask the community for two things. And one of them is, we need to keep that spirit of 45 alive. So by sharing stories, talking to our veterans, thanking them, that's the first thing. And the second thing we need to ask the community for is to help us find our remaining World War II and Korean War veterans. So if you know a veteran that hasn't been on their honor flight, please have them go to honorflightsandiego.org to get an application for that. So to our World War II veterans, from a grateful nation, we say thank you for your service and sacrifice. You're in our hearts forever. Please share your story. We love you. You will not be forgotten. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. And I'd really, once again, like to thank Honor Flight San Diego and the Spirit of 45 for the wonderful partnership that they've had with the USS Midway Museum for quite some time and for being with us today. And I'd also like to thank GEICO Military for their outstanding sponsorship of not only this ceremony, but all of the Midway's 75th anniversary for the end of World War II activities and commemoration. So I'd like to thank all three of them for their great support. Now I'd like to introduce three American heroes. Veterans of World War II, all in their 90s, as Julie indicated. The sacrifices that they and their comrades in arms have made 3/4 of a century ago are the reason why we continue to enjoy the freedoms we have today in the United States. It is without question that they are part of America's greatest generation, and we can't be more privileged to have them with us this morning. I'll let each of them tell you a little bit about themselves and how they, in all the different corners of the globe, felt when they got the news that the war was over. We have Don Hubbard, who is a Navy pilot. He's flown about 400 different aircraft. Is that about right, Don? Close. And he's flown them all over the world. We have Jack Scott, who was in the Pacific at the end of the war, but he was also with his crew on the USS Maloy, which was a destroyer supporting the invasion, the D-Day invasion of Normandy in 1944. And we have Al Hansen, also a Navy airman who participated in the air war in the Pacific Theater. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Don Hubbard.
I'd like to say one thing. The word nimble is not in my vocabulary anymore. I also like to thank Julie for the honor flight. I went on the honor flight last October. Absolutely unbelievable. They took us to every monument in Washington. We had a police escort wherever we went. We had great food, camaraderie. I had with me there were about 60 other vets, and we could almost see them get an inch taller as they stood there for all the ceremonies. It's a very well worthwhile thing to do. Now in my case, I was in pre-flight school. I was down in Athens, Georgia when the war ended. I was hoping to become a Navy pilot, and I was a little ambivalent. I was really happy that the war ended because so many of my friends were in the war, but I also was worried about becoming a Navy pilot. The Navy solved my problem. They said, you can become a Navy pilot, but you have to serve in the fleet as a midshipman for a year. A midshipman gets $65 a month in flight pay, $95 a month. World War II was going to end all wars, so the Navy really didn't think they would need us. Within two years, I was flying out of Morocco, trying to locate Russian radars. We were flying out of Morocco over the Berlin airlift, up and down the Baltic, and into the Adriatic, and up and down the Adriatic, at 6,000 feet, where they could see us and turn their radar on. And that wasn't the end of it. I went from there to the training command, and all my other friends who had also gotten wings were now on their way to Korea. So this stuff doesn't end, and it's not ending now. I did see something on Facebook which gave me a laugh, talking about the current situation. This guy said, I get all of my exercise now shaking my head in disbelief. We just cannot, we cannot accept what's happening with the younger people. They don't understand. When I was a kid, everybody was gone. They had gone into service. All the older guys went right away. I went, and then all the people behind me went. The whole Boy Scout troop was in the service. My entire high school class was in the service. And I'm just hoping that it never happens that badly again, but God bless America. This is the greatest country in the world. People want to come here, and they should always remember that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Don. If I could now ask Jack Scott to take the podium.
Good morning. It's a beautiful day here in San Diego. The days were not always beautiful. I was at Normandy at 6 o'clock in the morning, bringing General Gerhardt of the 29th Division in. In the end of the war, by the end of the war, I was transferred to the Pacific on a minesweep, and I was coming up from the Panama Canal to San Diego. We finished our chores by going out and sweeping the Yellow Sea from the tip of Korea down to Shanghai. And that kind of wraps up of the things of where I was and what I did. Till later I went in the Navy USN, because during the war you were USNR. And I was at Korea. So I have a wide span of things and a wide span of Navy affiliation. I'm finishing my Navy career here as a docent on the USS Maloy. I got Maloy on the brain this morning. This is Maloy. This is aboard the USS Midway, where I am a docent for 15 years. So thank you all. Thank God for this country, and may God bless her. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jack. And now if I could have Al Hansen come on up here and take us home.
I think I'm the young one of the bunch. But anyway, I went into the Navy in 1944 at the age of 16. Mom signed a piece of paper that said he's 17, and that started it. And about 3 months after I enlisted, I was in the Pacific, and I flew through some of the islands of the Pacific, ended up in the Philippines, and we moved from Leyte to Palawan, and we put our squadron down, VPB 106, in Port-au-Princesa at Palawan. When the war ended, we all shouted, "We can go home." Well, those who had timed flight went home. Those of us who didn't did not go home. So a lot of guys were transferred to various other squadrons, and they did this horrible thing to me and my crew, and they sent us to help Admiral Van Hook close all the bases in the Pacific, Australia, and New Zealand. And that was down in Melbourne, Australia, where we cleaned up the aircraft, took the guns off and things like that, and made a nice aircraft for the Admiral to fly around in. Well, then they didn't need 6 of us. I was one of the 6. We could go home. No. I'll finish my story up with this. I'm 17 years old, and I've got this horrible job. I was in charge of 400 vehicles at the age of 17, which meant I had a car every night and all the petrol that I could use up. And believe it or not, that lasted for 10 months. So that's my story about World War II. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Al. At this point, we'd like to pay tribute to the men and women who paid the ultimate sacrifice during World War II, as well as all those veterans who have passed away over the last 75 years. Through our wreath-laying ceremony, we're going to show our eternal gratitude and respect as we remember the fallen, honor all those who've served, and hopefully teach our children the value of freedom, because as we all know, freedom is not free. So I'd like to ask Mac and Al if they could help us with the honor, and then once the wreath is tossed, if we could have Don and Jack help with the salute. We're also flattered to have Roy Zaney, again from the Bugles Across America, play taps during the wreath-laying ceremony.
No, I'm standing.
everyone for joining us today. And while this concludes the ceremony here on the ship, the USS Midway Museum will continue to commemorate this milestone in history. Please visit our website at midway.com to participate in our honor wall of World War II heroes, find out details about our upcoming webcast series with our historian Carl, and learn about the amazing augmented reality experience on the Battle of Midway that will be soon available to our Midway visitors. Before leaving you today, all of us on the Midway, Honor Flight San Diego, Spirt of 45, and GEICO Military, we urge you all to reflect on the significance of this day. As Julie Brightwell mentioned, whenever you get a chance, thank a veteran, any veteran, for their service and sacrifice to our country, and thank an active duty service member for defending our freedoms in this very dangerous world. Thanks again. We're looking forward to seeing you on the Midway. Have a great day.
Good on you?